There is breaking news that Jerome Powell might step down. And the interesting aspect is about who is reporting it. But the other aspect of all of this is that if Jerome Powell and the Fed decide to cut interest rates, what is that going to do to gold? And how will the reaction of the gold price potentially skyrocket in flight? Now let's get into this clip here about gold revaluation.
This just in an effort to solve the U.S. debt crisis, the government has just revalued gold to $20,000 an ounce.
Now that might be AI, but this is not, right? So the Fed or the FAFSA, the Freddie and Fannie Mae chairman, William J. Plute, is reporting that Jerome Powell is considering resigning with all of this. And it's not just, hey, he wrote this article, he's going to let it sweep under the rug. No. Plute is literally reposting all of this from his Twitter account that has 3 million followers. He tweeted all of that out, and he also reposted this video right here.
Piled on to the Trump versus Powell feud. Listen to this.
Issued a statement today saying, quote, "I'm encouraged by reports that Jerome Powell is considering resigning. I think this will be the right decision for America and the economy will boom," unquote. I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to.
So now with all of this, Jerome Powell and Plute are at it publicly. And the interesting stuff is that Plute has been saying all this stuff very publicly. Jerome Powell also he's been very quiet, but Trump has been very public about his disdain with Powell. So it makes it all for a lot of theater, a lot of political theater when we have, Powell's time coming to an end very close to here. But the Fed chair and Powell has repeatedly said that he plans to serve out the remainder of his term, which is now just a few more months down the line. But it's interesting because the Trump administration has essentially been coming at Powell's throat time and time again. Now, there's been Trump outwardly calling for a 3 percentage point rate cut, which is astronomical. You honestly do not see anything like this ever, right? I mean, normally we see a 50 basis point, 25 basis point cut. The 3 percentage point cut would be absolutely unprecedented, and it would be something that we have never seen before. And it would be the largest rate cut in history, and the market would honestly react in a very unique way. I actually asked ChatGPT how the market would react to Powell resigning. Well, this is what ChatGPT had to say. It's pretty interesting that there would be huge market volatility. Stock and bond markets will likely react quickly, especially if resignation is unexpected or tied to controversy, which this one seems to be tied to controversy. Bitcoin and gold may spike as investors seek hedges amid uncertainty. Look, that's them saying it. US dollar might weaken depending on who is expected to replace him, and the rate expectations shift. Powell is viewed as a pragmatic moderate. If replaced by a more dovish or hawkish figure, the expected path or interest rates could change. Markets would rapidly reprice the forward guidance on perceived stance of the successor. So it's already seeming like this is currently going to happen, right? So there's different, obviously, psychological effects, investor confidence, all of that other stuff, but the acceleration or delay of the rate cuts is the big aspect of all of this, because Trump has essentially said, hey, you know what? Powell has always been too slow, right? Everybody around the world has been cutting rates, and I want him gone. Trump has honestly looked into, could he fire the Fed chair? And he's found out that he could, but he won't do it. So what is he doing? He's putting a lot of pressure, to say the very least, on Jerome Powell. But Jerome Powell is staying pretty strong. So this is why I think it's pretty unique that even though Jerome Powell is staying strong here and looking at all the different aspects of this potential rate cut, that we have now the talk of him potentially resigning or stepping down. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen. But what is interesting is that what we're seeing right here, the U.S. debt keeps on tricking up, right? The Doge is now, even though it's ticking up and it's saving taxpayer money, it's not doing as much as it was, right? And there's been this other public feud, Doge versus DC. Trump and Musk have essentially been going at it here lately as well, saying, hey, will Doge continue to cut government spending? Because Donald Trump wants this big, beautiful bill that he describes, right? And we'll get into that in a minute. But we'll see how Elon looks at this big, beautiful bill. Obviously, he hates it, and he keeps saying that there's so many different aspects of all of it. But the big, beautiful bill is essentially going to rise up spending. So this rising up of spending, the U.S. debt that we see just trickling up and just rapidly increasing, well, it's led to this public dispute here. So not only is Trump having a public dispute with Powell and essentially saying that he is not cutting interest rates, he's taking way too much time. Well, Elon's saying, hey, we need to cut a lot of cost. You know, there's been rumors of a new American party between Michael Saylor and Elon. Maybe I'll do a video on that down the line. But all of this, right? The cost-cutting mission faced fierce resistance from Democrats before unexpected split with the president. So at the onset, Donald Trump entrusted the Doge with Elon, saving America from bankruptcy, de-bloating bureaucracy, draining the DC swap. But then now he's also flip-flopped on that. Musk bought Twitter and fired 75% of the staff with no effect on his operations from day to day. But the interesting is that Doge now and Trump, this is a great picture. I really like it here, that it's showing, hey, they're essentially at odds here. The government loves to be inefficient when it comes down to it, right? They love to spend our money. It's not necessarily that the government has a problem obtaining money. It's this problem right here. The government has a problem. The debt per taxpayer at $323,000 is insane. I mean, if you look at the average salary in the US, the average salary is about $60,000. So what does this tell you? Well, this tells me that it is like 5.25 years on full salary, just going straight towards the U.S. debt in order for the U.S. to pay off their debt, for the citizens to pay off their debt, right? So that's obviously not even going to be in the cards here. But the big, beautiful bill, you know, is free advertising for Bitcoin. I know I don't talk a lot about Bitcoin on this channel, but free advertising for all these inflation hedges. Why? Well, because it'll set the stage for major fiscal expansion and prompting several market analysts to point towards Bitcoin as a potential long-term beneficiary, right? Because the government spending, inflation, and the US dollar would be going down due to this bill, right? Or everything would be going into the direction we don't want it to. So the dollar strength would be going down, inflation would be going up. There'd be a lot of differences here, right? But the interesting stuff is that we're seeing essentially the Fed and Donald Trump at odds publicly. So the FOMC meeting that we have literally in 18 days, a little less than that. Well, the Fed is not going to cut interest rates, at least at this current state, unless Jerome Powell resigns, right? There's a 5.2% chance if Jerome Powell stays in. And why is he looking at that, right? I mean, because like we're looking at the strength of the dollar here. We're talking about that. We're at 97.8. Now, for those of you guys who keep coming to this live stream, and I appreciate, we got McLovins in here. He's saying politicians love to spend money they don't have. Who knew? Exactly, right? They've got a spending problem. But Powell realizes this, and this is why he's refusing to cut interest rates. So although I don't agree with all of Powell's decisions, I do think that I have a differing opinion with Trump here because, you know, keeping interest rates high, giving that little bit of attention to the market, although they need to refinance in order to avoid spending more debt or paying more debt from the refinancing of these loans, this is what we're seeing, right? The strength of the dollar is not where it needs to be. It's at 97, nearly 98. But since I've been tracking this, it's been fairly low. And if you look at the way that the S&P 500 year to date, up 6% year to date. That's pretty solid. You know, the average during its run, its generational run from that decade of like 2010 to 2020, before the cerveza sickness, the average, the expected was like 8 to 12%. So we already got that about half the year through, right? So we're going to see that probably potentially increase. And the crazy thing is that people are now expecting assets to absolutely explode with all of this. They're expecting assets to just, take off the 20%. If I'm not getting a 20% return, I don't think it's a good investment. I've heard friends and family say that these days, and it's absolutely insane that we're talking about that. But the big, beautiful bill, it's going to be looking at potentially adding a ton of more spending. And so that's going to see inflation rise up. And it's going to see this number here. I'm getting dizzy just looking at it, man. Just seeing all this debt climb up. But this 3 percentage point rate cut is just way too high. I personally don't think that we should ever cut that much. But there's also the aspect of Trump saying, hey, you know what? We're going to call for a 3% rate cut. Maybe we're not going to settle for that high, or maybe we're not going to get that high, but we'll settle for a little bit less. So there's a lot of you guys that are coming to this channel time and time again, and I do appreciate it. But I do realize that a good chunk of you guys, like 80%, let's see, not subscribed. 92%. I'm looking at this real time. 92% of you guys are not subscribed. So please, if you're watching this, subscribe to the channel. Help me get to that 1K, because we're going to keep talking about the Dixie and why the strength of the dollar is going to increase over time. No matter what Powell and Trump does, I'm going to be doing a bunch of different live streams on all of this. So be sure to be tuned in. And thank you guys all for coming out. Make sure you're smoking that like Cheech and Chong. Please hit that subscribe button for your boy. I'm even growing out a mustache for you guys. Watch out. Kid's looking deadly here. I've got a vlog coming of me running with the bulls here soon as well on a different channel. I'll tease that there, but be on the lookout for all that. A lot of great content coming soon. And thank you guys all for tuning in to this great live stream.